Hi, I'm Senator Jim Inhofe, a Republican senator from Oklahoma. Today I'm happy to bring you the good news about the complete collapse of the global warming movement and the failure of the Kyoto process as world leaders meet for the United Nations Global Warming Conference in Durban, South Africa. For the past decade, I've been the leader in the United States Senate standing up against global warming alarmism and cap and trade, which would have been the largest tax increase in the history of America. This victory is especially important today as families in America and around the world continue to face really tough economic times, and tossing out any remote possibility of a UN global warming treaty is one of the most important things we can do for the economy. I'm making this announcement from Washington, D.C., where I'm confident that the only person left talking about global warming is me. The message from Washington to the UN delegates in South Africa is this week could not be any clearer. You are being ignored, and you are being ignored by your biggest allies in the United States. That's President Obama and the Democratic leadership in the Senate. And there's a good reason for this. Just 2 years ago, President Obama, along with members of his administration, several members of the congressional Democratic leadership, and Al Gore traveled to Copenhagen to tell the world that the United States was ready to join the United Nations efforts in implementing the costly global warming regulations through cap and trade legislation. Now, knowing this was nothing but a lie, I made the trip to Copenhagen as a one-man truth squad to inform the 191 countries in attendance that there was no way the United States would ever pass global warming cap and trade. Now, they didn't like it, but I was right and they were wrong. Now, 2 years later, my colleagues are nowhere to be found at the latest conference. Nevertheless, President Obama and his allies in the far-left environmental movement are working under the radar to impose global warming restrictions in the United States through regulations by the Environmental Protection Agency. As you'll remember this, even Lisa Jackson, Obama's EPA administrator, has admitted publicly that U.S. action alone would not reduce world CO2 emissions. Now that the UN global warming movement has completely collapsed, why is President Obama still determined to move forward with costly global warming regulations that will destroy our economy while providing no meaningful environmental benefits? To make matters worse, President Obama is doing this even though the entire basis of these global warming regulations rests on the science of the now discredited United Nations IPCC. And of course, the IPCC has refused to reform its process, and I can only assume that this is because doing so would undermine those in the Obama administration who called the IPCC the gold standard of climate science. So even though we've had many victories, our fight isn't over. Today we're working to stop President Obama from achieving quietly through regulation what he could not achieve through legislation. I had originally hoped to join the party in Durban with my good friends and allies from CFAC. I understand that Craig Rucker, the Lord Monckton, I remember Lord Monckton well when he was here in Washington, and my former communications director, the very quiet and demure Mark Morano, are on the ground in Durban to tell whatever press is actually covering the UN conference the real story. I'm particularly pleased that Mark Morano will be releasing his A to Z climate reality check report. This report shows that on virtually every claim from A to Z, the promoters of man-made climate fears are failing, and the global warming movement is suffering a scientific death of 1,000 cuts. It categorizes and indexes the full range of climate developments. It includes key facts, peer-reviewed studies, and the latest data in developments with links for further reading on an exhaustive range of man-made global warming claims. Good work, Mark. But let's also remember that even though cap and trade legislation is gone, done, dead, forever, President Obama is going full force in his efforts to pass these destructive regulations through the EPA. And even if we defeat Obama in the 2012 elections, which I sure hope we do for the sake of my 20 kids and grandkids. They're still out there. MoveOn.org, George Soros, Michael Moore, and the Hollywood elites are not going to give up. And they've got the press and unlimited resources on their side. So it's not over yet. Let me end by thanking my friends from CFAC for organizing this press conference today. We have worked closely together to expose this costly agenda for years. You should know that global warming skeptics everywhere wish we could be with you celebrating the final nail in the coffin on location in South Africa. And tell Al Gore hello for me.